Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm Dr. Steve Liu. I'm the chief scientist of Tinder. So today, I want to share with you how we personalize recommendations at Tinder. So in the previous talk, Xavier just mentioned personalization is very important, especially in the domain of medical and health records. And now I will take you more information about personalization at Tinder. So to get you started, I'd like to introduce you to Tinder for those who you may are unfamiliar. I see smiling faces, so I assume all of you are very familiar with Tinder. Okay, then that's done, okay? So joking aside, so let's see, this is a short video. It shows how Tinder works. So we present you with potential new people to connect with. And you can swipe right or swipe left to indicate whether you like them or you want to pass them. And each user on Tinder has a profile. And then if both users swipe right on each other, then we make a match, and then can chat within the app. So other social networks, like Facebook, help to connect you with the people you already know and stay in touch with them. But for Tinder's purpose is different. We call social discovery, because we aim so hard to connect you with new people, and we do so on a global scale. So Tinder launched in 2012, a little more than 5 years ago. And today, it is used in over 190 countries in the whole world. And each day, there are more than 1.6 billion swipes. And we have made over 20 billion matches so far since the inception of Tinder. So in order to help our users connect to new people who are most relevant to them, we are always working to improve and personalize our recommendations. This is why personal recommendation matter at Tinder. And today we will focus on this specific algorithm we have been building at Tinder to achieve this goal. So it is called TeamVec, short for Tinder Vector. I'll also show how we evaluate TeamVec's performance. And last but not least, I will share a sneak peek into how we are implementing TeamVec into new product features at Tinder. And I remember when I was a PhD student, Stephen Hawking mentioned in his book that if your audience will be halved if you include one more equation. So I will try so hard in this presentation. I don't want to include any of the equations because I love you so much. Okay. And of course, except for one exception, at the end of the talk, I will include one very simple high school equation. Okay. So nowadays, no matter where you are on the internet, whether it's streaming music on Spotify, or buying a book on Amazon, or watching a movie on Netflix, you are being recommended something through their platforms. At Tinder, we try and provide positive experiences for all our users and aim to recommend most relevant potential matches to them. Providing relevant recommendations is especially important for Tinder users. Because when you are shopping on Amazon, you can buy a book Amazon recommended to you. But it doesn't matter if the book likes back to you. Again, I see smiling faces, so you understand what I mean. So on Tinder, in fact, both users like each other by swiping right and in order to connect. So this is a two-way. And then only in that way, you will have a very meaningful and engaging experience on Tinder. In fact, this is where the real value of Tinder comes in. So if we can improve the quality of recommendations for each user through personalization, that will lead to increased and improved matches and messages. And this in turn can lead to high-quality real-life connections. And creating new real-life connections is what Tinder ultimately strives to do. In fact, over time, you will see everyone who meets your preferences on Tinder. But to make the most of your time, we work to personalize your recommendations. Of course, at Tinder, we make use of common techniques used by other technology companies, such as collaborative filtering for recommendations. But that's not the topic of today. We are also in the process of developing new approaches, such as content-based filtering, which we try to understand your bio using natural language processing techniques. As illustrated on the right, we may show these people to each other because they both mentioned they like dogs in their bios. So today, I will focus on one specific algorithm we have been developing. It's called TeamVec. So again, it is abbreviation for Tinder vectors. It is a new recommendation algorithm that personalizes each user's experience based on information gathered only from their unique swiping preferences. So in TeamVec, users are represented as vectors in an embedding space. And we use neural network-based approach to obtain the embedding. So let me first give an overview of how TeamVec works before I dive into the details. So on Tinder, users are divided into two categories, the swipers and the swipees. Of course, each user can be the swiper or can be the swipee. But for purpose of this talk, we use swipers and swipees to indicate. So in the TeamVec approach, each swipee will be mapped into a high-dimensional vector. That is, the swipees are embedded into an embedding space. The embedded vector represents possible characteristics which are implicit to our users. Note these embedded vectors are constructed in a way such that similar users, I will explain similar later, those similar users are closer in the embedding space. So examples of potential characteristics may include the activities. For example, whether a user is playing a football or like to do surfing. Their interests, for example, whether they like pets or not. Or environment, for example, the profile photo is taken indoor or outdoor. Or the chosen career paths, whether they are software engineers, like most people here, or they are medical doctors. So once the swipees are embedded, the close proximity of the two vectors in the embedding space will indicate the swipees are similar. That means they may share common characteristics. So of course, the goal for the TeamVec approach is to do personalized recommendation. So after the users are represented as vectors in the embedding space, we will use this information to make better recommendations. So TeamVec, in fact, is motivated by the word-to-vec model, which was developed by the Google researchers back in 2013. In order to produce word embeddings, it is extremely useful, especially for natural language processing tasks. Here, I first want to explain what is an embedding and why we want to use it. So embedding, in fact, is a representation of entities in a latent space. In the context of word-to-vec, the entities are the words, while in TeamVec, the entities are the users. A main property of the embeddings is that the entities share similar context, will be mapped closer in the embedding space. So the second question is why we want to use embedding. So one reason is that using embedded vectors in a continuous space, we have many benefits. For example, we can represent entities much more efficiently. And another benefit is that we can also do calculations on them, which is extremely useful. For example, in Tinder, we have millions of users. If we look at each user as an individual dimension, then we would have to use millions of dimensions. But in contrast, using TeamWhack, we can explore dimensions much more efficiently, using only tens or at most hundreds of dimensions. This is huge saving. So the following table shows the side-by-side comparison of Word2Vec and TeamWhack, in case you are familiar with Word2Vec. So the goal of the Word2Vec is to produce word embeddings. And for TeamWhack, I mentioned before, the goal is to produce user embeddings. An important property of the Word2Vec is that words that share common context are closer in the embedding space. Correspondingly, for TeamWhack, the property is that swipees who share common characteristics I mentioned before will be closer in the vector space we are building. And both models, Word2Vec and TeamWhack, use neural network for training. And the difference is that for the training data, in the Word2Vec model, it's a large corpus of text. While in TeamWhack, it's very interesting. We use large amount of swiping information available. So now I will show you TeamWhack in action. But before that, I want to say that please note, we take the privacy of our users very seriously. So the images used here in this presentation are not of actual Tinder users, and nor their really preferences. Instead, they are the stock photos. However, they do illustrate the mechanics of TeamWhack, as I will show you later. So for the purpose of this explanation, we are also assuming that swipees were swiped right or swiped left based on the simple characteristics presented in their profile photos. But again, please note that these common characteristics are only for illustration purpose, again, for this talk. And at Tinder, we do not record or extrapolate these common characteristics when our users swipe. We do not do that. Okay, so now let's come back to the presentation. So on the left-hand side, okay, are two swipers. On the left-hand side are the two swipers, Josh and Sarah. They are swiping on Tinder. Those on the right-hand side are the swipees. And those people, they swiped right or swiped left on. And if it's swipe right, so that means you like the person. And if it's swipe left, that means you passed. And for swipe right, it's outlined in green. And for swiped left, it's outlined in red color. As you can see, for Josh, who is a swiper, his swiping behavior seems to indicate that he is more interested in connecting with potential matches who wear glasses. And he swiped right on Ashley, Bernadette, and Caitlin. And for Sarah, okay, the swiping behavior seems to indicate that she wants to connect with potential matches who wear hats, especially in this rainy day in San Francisco. However, she did not swipe right on David, poor David, okay? And that David, in fact, is wearing a hat. So what's the difference? Yeah, the beard. So the difference between the users she swiped right on and also David, whom she swiped left, is that David doesn't have any facial hair. As I mentioned before, so TeamWhack was motivated by the Word2Vec model. If you are familiar with Word2Vec, then you know it comes with two flavors in terms of training for Word2Vec. One is called the continuous bag of words, CBOW, and the other one is called SpeakGram. In fact, we use both at Tinder. But to save time, I will only focus on SpeakGram in this talk. So SpeakGram is a commonly used model to generate input and output training for the neural network in order to obtain the embeddings. In the original SpeakGram model, we have sentences, as I put there. In TeamWhack, the sentences, in fact, is matched into the segments of the likes by a swiper in a segment. So in this example, a swiper swipes right on these three gentlemen. Hence, they appear in the same context. In word-to-vect, the context is the nearby words appeared within the same sentence together with the target word. And in this example, on the top, it is the word of quick. So quick is the target. And the context is surrounding words. So in TeamVec, as we shown in the example, the target is the middle gentleman. Let's call him Bob. So the context is the person who are being co-swiped by the swiper in the same segment. And in this example, are Alex and Charlie. And here we will use the target and the context as input-output pairs in the training phase. So let's continue with the previous slide. So the skipgram and the context pairs are then fed as the input and output into a two-layer neural network in order to learn the user embeddings. So this is a feed-forward neural network with a hidden layer, and the dimension of the hidden layer corresponds to that of the latent space. The input vector is a one-hot vector with the size of the users. And at the output layer, we use softmax and cross-entropy to calculate the loss. The embedding is then obtained through the training of the neural network, as illustrated on the right. So you see the input, the output, and the hidden layer. So we trained the TeamVec embedding on a machine with 32 cores with 256 gigabyte memory. After we train the neural network, remember we only use the swiping data. So we can get the user's embedded vectors in the embedding space, as shown in this illustration. So each point represents a swipe piece embedded vector in the embedding space. If two users in the embedding space are close to each other, that means they may share common characteristics, as we discussed before. They are in fact identified through the training process by the neural network because they were co-swiped by many, many users. Here, we observe several clusters of the swipe piece in the embedding space, and let's zoom in on that. As we can see, users within the same cluster may share some commonalities. The ones we show here have explicitly shared characteristics. Again, I want to emphasize that we use stock photos instead of using the actual user photos to protect our user privacy, which is extremely important. As you can see in the examples, the commonalities for the women in the cluster on the left is that they have dogs in their photos. The men in the cluster on the right share the common characteristics of wearing glasses. After we get the user embeddings, the next question, of course, is how we can use these embeddings to serve new recommendation a swiper may like. The procedure is explained in this slide. So we have Josh, who has already swiped right on 3 women, Ashley, Bernadette, and Kathleen. Now we want to serve new recommendations to Josh. In fact, there are several ways to do that. Here we only illustrate one simple approach. In this simple approach, the first step is to calculate a preference vector for Josh. The preference vector is calculated as the mean of the embedded vectors of the women he already likes, because we already got the embedded vectors. Now we can do the calculation. So then we find other users who are close to this preference vector. And in this example, we found Debbie, whom Josh has not seen before. And in fact, Debbie is close to the preference vector of the Josh we just calculated. So which is why we recommend her to Josh based on his previous preference. And as I promised, this is the only equation I put into the slides. Now let's evaluate how TeamVec performs. I have more numbers, but not equations. That is, how accurately can we predict the swipe left and swipe right from a swiper on a swipee? So remember, for a recommendation, the swiper can only have these two decisions, swipe left or swipe right on the swipee. So in fact, the recommendation algorithm can be evaluated as a binary classifier. So we used the ROC curve as a performance measure. So RAC curve stands for the receiver operating characteristic curve, and it is a commonly used evaluation metric for binary classifiers. So we vary the discrimination threshold and draw the corresponding classifiers, true positive rate and false positive rate. The true positive rate in the context of TeamWhack is defined as the number of correctly predicted tasks divided by the number of total real likes from the offline data. Of course, for true positive rate, the higher the better. And the x-axis in the ROC curve is a false positive rate. And in the context of TeamWhack, this is defined as the number of incorrectly predicted likes divided by the number of total real passes. And for false positive rate, the lower the better. The area under the ROC captures the performance. So for TeamWhack, it reaches to 90%, which means overall, the classifier we developed based on TeamWhack performed excellently. And let's see another commonly used evaluation metric for the performance of binary classifier, which is called the F1 score. It measures a test accuracy. It is defined as the harmonic mean of the precision and recall on the corresponding classifier. The F1 score, in fact, for the TeamWhack approach, reaches 85%. Of course, we know the best possible value for F1 score is 1, and the worst possible value is 0. 85% again demonstrate it performed very well. As we discussed, TeamWhack is used in the personalized recommendation as a service at Tinder. Our goal will always be to present new products to our users that we are confident that our users will like. And most importantly, in a fun, spontaneous, and engaging way. So in fact, TeamWhack also serves as a foundation for our other new products. And of course, while I cannot share too much details at this time, we will roll new features out slowly to our users. First to maximize the quality, and then learn more and improve along the way. So that echoes what Dr. June Andrews discussed the iteration in the morning talk for machine learning systems. Now, in conclusion, today we discussed personalized recommendations at Tinder. Specifically, we discussed TeamWhack, which is a personalized recommendation algorithm based on our user embeddings. Our approach only utilizes the simple input data, that is only the swiping information on our platform, and not using any specific user profile data. We show that clusters from the learned user embeddings show meaningful set of users that they share common characteristics. And the evaluation shows that the swipe prediction achieved very high accuracy. So TeamWhack is not only used as a personalized recommendation at Tinder, but also used as a foundation for building new product at Tinder. And of course, it's not just me who is working on this on Tinder. This is a joint effort by the talented Tinder science team, which I'm leading, and also many other Tinder team members working together. And thank you.